welcome to Broken Entertainment. So, by now you may have heard this story already about some publications have been censoring certain books that have been released in previous years to make modern audiences, quote unquote, feel comfortable. And this kind of stuff this legitimately just pisses me off. Because there's a lot of reasons. But one, it's basic censorship, right? You're taking books and you're editing them to fit the way you think they should be presented in your world of today. Well, these books aren't a product of our world of today. They're a product of the time in which they were written. And the works, as they were written, are the intent and the creation of the author. Whether or not you agree with how they treat people or how the descriptions are worded or any of that is irrelevant, because they were not written with today's standards. And if you remove them and you censor them and you twist them around to fit a more modern understanding, you are changing the author's intent and characterization, and you're removing the ability of people to read them and understand them as products of their time, and to understand that time through the lens of that particular book. So you're censoring history, you're censoring the author's words, and you're censoring the book itself because you don't like the way the author described things, because you find certain words offensive. It's as bad as banning the book outright. And I hate the banning of books, I hate the burning of books, and I hate the censorship of books, because whether you agree with a book is irrelevant. The book is there, it's presenting ideas, it's presenting entertainment. And you can read it, but you don't have to agree with it. Reading it allows you to understand different perspectives, allows you to understand history through the writings of people who were there at the time, who lived in that time. Okay, reading Mark Twain allows us to understand his region and time period better through the lens of somebody who was there. And that applies to Goosebumps and Roald Dahl as well, and any other book. Changing these words, changing the presentation of the book, is also theft. It is theft of the author's work. It is theft of the author's effort and time and creativity. Because you're changing it. You're changing what he wrote or she wrote and saying, no, this doesn't work for our times. We're gonna change these words here. And no, you did not write that book. You do not get to change that book unless it is to translate the book or to fix errors, grammatical issues, that kind of thing that comes with the release of new editions of books, where they go through and they change, there's typographical error here, that kind of thing. That does not alter the author's work. Changing the words, and yes, adding sentences that were never there, because that happened too. They added entire sentences. This is not the work. The publishers seem to think these are their books. Well, we have the right to publish them. Yes, you bought the right to publish them, but it is not your book. It is the author's book. And unfortunately, with a lot of these, the author's not alive anymore to defend themselves. So it's up to readers to defend what the author does. And unfortunately, traditional publishing companies today seem to be rather cynical. And they seem, in this case in particular, to be insincere. And I'll explain that in a minute. But I want to I'm going to start with R.L. Stine and Goosebumps, because he's still alive. And it came out in the UK Times, where this story was originally released, that R.L. Stine was working with this group of people at the publisher to edit his books for modern sensitivities. First of all, you do not have the right as an individual to never be offended. You're going to read stuff and it's going to offend you sometimes. You're going to hear stuff and it's going to offend you sometimes. You're going to view stuff and it's going to offend you sometimes. And you do not have the right to tell other people how to write or what to do so that you don't get offended. If you are offended by something, you have to process that yourself. So, this is in the New York Post, but it's elsewhere as well. Goosebumps author R.L. Stine says publisher made quote-unquote woke edits behind his back. Kids horror author R.L. Stine has denied sanitizing his classic Goosebumps books to quote-unquote appease the woke, accusing his publisher of altering his work behind his back. 79-year-old horror author spoke up after the Times of London claimed that he had censored over a dozen of his books to avoid mentions of race or calling characters fat or crazy. This story is false. I have never changed a word in a Goosebumps book, Stine stated firmly to a report accusing him of re-editing the books to appease quote-unquote the woke. I wish they'd stop. Look, I don't use that term very often. And I don't use SJW very often. And that's because I want to deal with the ideas. I want to deal with how things are presented. I don't want to deal with forming groups and pushing people into those groups so that you can dismiss them out of hand. So I don't typically use those words. So when I'm saying them here, it is from the article. Instead, the changes were made behind his back, Stine said in response to an angry reader who accused him of being shameful for supporting censorship. The stories aren't true. I've never changed a word in Goosebumps, he said again, of the second biggest selling book series after Harry Potter. I didn't know that. I knew they were popular. I had no idea they were that popular. That's impressive. Any changes were never shown to me. The changes sparked outrage coming on the heels of woke edits to Roald Dahl's classic kids book, as well as planned changes to Ian Fleming's James Bond. Unlike those, however, the UK Times initially accused Stine of making the changes. Fox News contributor Guy Benson said that changing Stine's work without his approval was fittingly especially creepy. So it's getting into opinions there. I'll leave that where it lays. The UK Times said it found more than 100 edits in ebook versions of the series of 62 books. It noted how one character who acts really cool, like the rappers on MTV videos, and again, this is a product of the time, okay? In the 90s, when these books were published, the rappers on MTV videos were very popular. Rap itself, that style of rap, was particularly popular and was in a lot of pop cultural things. You know, it was in the Ninja Turtles movies. So him referencing that is not a racial thing. It's just a reference of the time. You know, now it makes less sense. Nobody really watches MTV for starters. And that kind of culture in that specific moment no longer applies. But it's still, that's the original work. That's the time period these books were written in. So now it just acts real cool and is described as having brown skin rather than being African American. Now see, the problem there is that you are actually changing the character. Okay? A number of races have brown skin. A number of people from different regions across the world have brown skin. This specifically was meant to be an African American. Now, it could be somebody from anywhere in South America. It could be somebody from Africa. It could be somebody from parts of Asia. You know, the author had a specific vision for the character in mind. This was their African American. And now that's gone. Replaced with vaguely ethnic. Mentions of slaves were also removed. Look, slavery was a horrible thing. Slavery remains a horrible thing. It happens all over the world. It is not typically racially motivated these days. Just like before the slavery that you're thinking of, it wasn't racially motivated then, for the most part. But that doesn't mean you're free from references to slavery. You don't get to just ignore that slavery happened. You don't just get to ignore that slavery continues to happen because it unsettles you. Mention of blackface worn by a character dressed as a dark and stormy night for Halloween. You know, That's not blackface. That's dark and stormy night face, okay? Yeah, they put on dark black makeup, but they're not. Blackface is like a white person dressing up as a black person. Okay? This is somebody dressing up as the a cliched introduction to a horror book. Right? It's a meta reference. It's not blackface. It's dark and stormy night face. And the fact that the people doing this couldn't see that and had to completely change the author's intent is ridiculous. Characters were no longer roly-poly and plump. Ones were described as now cheerful. That in itself is a stereotype. Not everybody who's overweight is cheerful. Characters Stine called overweight are now merely huge. Do you want to be called overweight? Or do you want to be called huge? So, they're trying to sanitize this stuff, and then they make it worse. Like, okay, that person's overweight. That's a statement of fact. It might bother people if they're overweight. It might bother you to be referred to as overweight. But would you rather be called overweight, or would you rather be called huge? Character Stine called over... already covered that. One with at least 6 chins is now at least 6'6". That's not the same thing. He's using intentionally colorful language to describe people because it sticks in your head, and the target audience is young. And at least 6 chins is describing someone who's extraordinarily obese in a colorful way. And they changed it to 6'6". Now it's just a tall person. That completely changes the character's description. They're not at all the same description at all, because somebody might be offended. So you're changing intent, you're changing design, you're changing word use with a specific purpose to water it down, in some cases making it worse along the way. A line about schoolgirls having crushes on their headmaster was cut, and a boy who wolf whistled now merely whistled loudly. Something dismissed as girl stuff is now just not interesting. So something that was dismissed previously by a presumably boy character as not of interest to boys is now simply not interesting at all. And that's not how boys in that time period would have talked. Numerous mentions of crazy were cut, replaced with terms such as silly, wild, and scary, lost her mind, and stressed. Crazy has a specific definition. Crazy is not silly. Crazy can be wild. Crazy people can be wild. Somebody who's crazy can be wild and crazy. Scary, somebody can be crazy and scary, or crazy scary. But crazy and scary are not interchangeable words. Lost her mind, I'll give you that one. But why did you change it to lost her mind? Because now you're using 3 words in the place of 1. The term a real nut is now a real wild one. Why? And nutcase is weirdo. Scholastic confirmed in the Post on Wednesday that it made changes to the series that has brought millions of kids blah 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 blah. Scholastic patting themselves on the back for something somebody else did. I respond to request. Yeah, there's a shocker. This drives me wild. Wait, no, that's not the same word. Silly. It drives me silly. No, doesn't work either. Crazy. There we go. Drives me crazy. Because of what I've already said, but also because this is not your work. You don't get to claim credit, because they're claiming credit for it. Not just for the edits, they're claiming credit for the books. It has made changes to the series that has brought millions of kids to reading through humor with just the right amount of scary. Scholastic takes its responsibility seriously to continue bringing this classic adolescent brand. Own your stuff. Own your stuff. Because then the only person that can change it while you are alive is you. If you are a creator, own your work. So this doesn't happen. So that people who had nothing to do with creating the work, who did not tell the story that entertained millions can't claim credit for it, while also changing it. So now I want to talk about Roald Dahl. This is in specific. I'm not going to make any judgment on this part. I'm simply going to put the words out there and let them be as they are. But we'll get down to, because this talks about the kind of how this is done behind the scenes. Because there are groups that are hired by these companies to do this. And there are groups that they expect you to hire when you're writing a book. Or they will hire them usually to come in and tell you, oh no, you can't write that. That might offend somebody. Oh no, you can't write that. That might not work out for the best. Somebody might be upset. Now, when I first started working towards publication, I was reading about sensitivity readers, and they were talking about, yeah, you should consider hiring somebody, or, well, not even hiring. It wasn't, at the time, it wasn't a hireable thing. And, hey, if you're not, let's say Asian, just to pull something out of a hat. If you're not Asian, but you're writing a story that's Asian, maybe talk to somebody who's Asian, get their opinion on stuff, have them read over it and see if there's some authenticity they can lend to it. That's fine. That makes sense. It's like if you're writing extensively about the medieval time period, you might want to go talk to somebody who knows about it. Right? If you're writing about swords and castles, you might want to talk to Shadiversity. But that's not what they mean anymore. Now they mean you might want to talk to somebody to make sure, and by you might want to talk to somebody, we mean pay them. You might want to pay somebody to go through your book and find problems with it that might offend somebody. And they will find problems because they're being paid to find problems. So you will be forced to edit your book because somebody's being paid to make you forced to edit your book. It's gotten completely off the rails. If you write something and it is largely offensive when it's released, that's your fault. And, your developmental editor probably should catch that if it's that bad. But that's the thing. Now you got to hire these people to go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure they find something offensive. And then replace it with words that are sometimes worse. So the editors who spent months neutering the works of... This is dailymail.co.uk. Again, these are their words. I would not typically throw that right in the beginning, but, that is what they were doing. They were neutering Roald Dahl's books. They're not wrong. Were led on their mission to not offend by an individual who describes herself as a non-binary, asexual, polyamorous relationship anarchist who is on the autism spectrum. So I've been reading that repeatedly, trying to figure out if they're a relationship anarchist or an anarchist. And I don't know if that's an issue with editing in the article or not. And I'm very curious as to what a relationship anarchist would actually consist of. Because I do not know. And I'm kind of wondering if that's a mistake in grammar. Because it would make more sense if somebody was into polyamorous relationships and anarchy. But it sounds like, the more I read it, they're a polyamorous relationship anarchist. I don't know what a relationship anarchist means. Editing of Roald Dahl's books, which broadly included eliminating language deemed insensitive and non-inclusive, was done largely by a UK-based group of consultants from Inclusive Minds. The organization is charged by their mission of making mainstream books represent every child. They do this by enlisting sensitivity readers and inclusion ambassadors to suggest edits to books that would scrub them of derogatory language, harmful assumptions about race, class, creed, and so on. In the case of Roald Dahl debacle, which has been lambasted across a number of countries by readers and publications alike, Joe Ross Barrett was at the head of the project. This is their picture. Ross Barrett, who recently departed Inclusive Minds to become a full-time DEI professional, describes herself as a non-binary, asexual, polyamorous relationship anarchist who is on the autism spectrum. Former project manager at the woke firm National Review reported that Ross Barrett posted on LinkedIn in 2022 she was working on a secret project involving the work of a well-known children's author. In a profile of Barrett that remains on the Inclusive Minds site, They, them is described as a writer and editor with a passion for championing inclusive content and policies. Barrett's previous work has been published in Bi-Able, an anthology about bisexuality and related identities, and AZE Journal, an online magazine for aromantic spectrum, asexual spectrum, and agender people. The profile continues. Joe is an autistic, non-binary, asexual, polyamorous relationship anarchist. Okay, that is 3 times, so that is what they are saying, and I have no idea what that means. They work with inclusive minds to help authors and publishers make their books more authentically representative of marginalized groups. They provided workshops and talks at A Place at the Table in 2020 and the UK Asexuality Conference in 2019. A group of inclusivity ambassadors and sensitivity readers aged 8 to 30 reported to Ross Barrett as a team worked to cleanse the collective works of Dahl. Why is an 8-year-old doing this? The team together dismantled many of the colorful phrases and names that Dahl employed in his writing. In the Twits, descriptions of appearances have been pared back. As Twits' fearful ugliness has been cut to ugliness. Why is fearful so wrong? Like, what? This is what I'm talking about. They're paid to do this. So they go through and they, oh, yep, fearful, gotta get rid of that. You're calling them ugly still. You're okay with that, but fearful is a problem. Fearful ugliness brings to mind somebody who's ugly and scary, and now you're just ugly, and I don't understand what's better about that. Ms. Hopper and Isio Trot is not an attractive middle-aged lady, but a kind middle-aged lady, because you wouldn't want somebody to be attractive. Passages not written by Dahl, who died in 1990, have been added. This is the part that really pisses me off. You want to edit stuff by taking things out, that's bad enough. But you're gonna add sentences? Own your stuff because it's not safe. Because they're willing to go in now and add whole sentences. In The Witches, a paragraph describing them as bald under their wigs is followed shortly by a new line. There are plenty of other reasons women might wear wigs, and there is certainly nothing wrong with that. Puffin said in a statement last week they will release 2 versions of each book, the original and the newer edited ones. And here's where we get to the cynicism I referred to. So, I know from other articles that the sales of the originals have skyrocketed. They're doing this to make money. They're releasing 2 versions of the book so they can make money off of the fact that a bunch of people are going to run out and want to buy the old ones because they don't want the censored stuff. So they're changing his work. They're changing words. They're removing words. They're adding entire sentences because they want to make an extra buck. They don't follow this ideology worth a hoot. If they really believed in this stuff and really felt in their heart this was the right thing to do, they'd release only the updated versions. But they're not. They're releasing both so they can make more money. I will bet that they release those in a classic compilation of all the books for some sort of special fee. High-priced collection kind of thing. And it'll sell like crazy and they'll make a bunch of money. And then they're going to find other authors and they're going to do the same thing. These are not your books to change. These are the author's books. And they speak of an intent and a time. And you change it and you add sentences and you alter meanings, change characters, change verbiage because you don't want to be offended. Or in this case, because you want to make extra money. Zero respect for authors coming out of this company. Both of these companies. This Penguin Random House, and you know what, R.L. Stine might be Scholastic. Penguin Random House and Scholastic. Zero respect for the authors. And honestly, zero respect for the readers. It's disgusting censorship, and there's no other way around that. If you are a creator, own your stuff. And if you're going to go the traditionally published route and therefore not own your stuff, make sure you keep copies. Get a first edition, put it on your shelf, and save that manuscript if you're not already doing it. Print it out. Bind it. Put it somewhere so that the original is maintained. Because 20 years down the line, someone might go, oh, you know, that word's really kind of offensive. Maybe we should go through these and edit them out. And you know what? We could probably sell the classic ones too while we're at it. Print it, bind it, stick it on a shelf. Don't ever, ever let the original go. You know, it's bad enough that they're changing movies on Blu-ray. They're slapping warnings on things. They're changing things. They're do something interesting. Go on Disney Plus and don't search for it. Just try to find it. Find Pocahontas. Go ahead. It's on there. But you have to search for it. This is the kind of games they play. And now, a lot of Blu-ray players connect to the internet and get updates. They can change the content of your movie through an update. And now they're doing it to books. We're going to edit the books so that they're not offensive. Some of the most important books in history, when they came out, they offended a lot of people. Think about that. So if you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Ring the bell for notifications so you get notified of new videos, and I will see you next time.